Welcome to the deep dive. We're really so glad you're here with us today because we're embarking on a journey that covers just an incredible sweeping scope of time.
Yeah, it really is a staggering timeline to consider when you step back and look at it.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, I want you to imagine a single continuous story arc that stretches back literally thousands of years. We are talking about ancient biblical covenants and prophecies laid down 2 millennia ago, and we are going to connect those ancient texts directly to the headlines of February 2026.
Right, specifically those unprecedented U.S. and Israeli military strikes on Iran.
Exactly, which makes our mission today that much more critical.
Yeah.
We are trying to map out this really complex, overarching thesis. We're going to look at the historical Jewish diaspora, the secular roots of the Zionist movement, a highly classified Pentagon memo from back in 2001, and, modern 21st century geopolitical warfare.
A lot of ground to cover.
It is. But we are going to explore how this perspective weaves all of those seemingly disparate threads into one cohesive timeline of end times or eschatological events.
And what makes this specific analysis so compelling to examine is its sheer scale. It looks at global history and argues that the rise and fall of nations, the shifting of borders, and the scattering of populations isn't just random, chaotic chance.
Yeah.
Instead, it posits that history is operating on a highly specific, conditional legal contract. By spotting the patterns across millennia, this lens suggests we can actually see the terms of that ancient contract being executed in real time.
Okay, let's unpack this. To understand the foundation here, we have to start at the absolute beginning, which is the Mosaic covenant. The texts describe this using a legal structure from the ancient Near East known as a suzerainty treaty. For those of us who aren't, ancient history scholars, could you break down how that type of treaty actually works?
Sure. Think of a suzerainty treaty as an unequal but highly structured contract between two parties. You have a suzerain, or a great king, and a vassal state.
Okay.
The great king offers immense benefits. We're talking military protection, fertile land, and prosperity. But it comes with a massive stipulation, which is absolute exclusive loyalty from the vassal. They cannot make alliances with other kings or bow to other authorities.
That makes sense.
And in the biblical texts, God is positioned as the great king, and the nation of Israel is the vassal.
So like any legally binding contract, if one party breaches the agreement, there are penal clauses. In Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, these clauses are known as the tokacha, or the curses.
Right.
But the analysis points out something crucial here. These weren't standard legal fines, like getting a ticket or doing a stint in jail. They were fundamentally pedagogical and existential.
Yes, they were disciplines meant to trigger a specific outcome.
Which was national repentance. If obedience to the great king led to an Eden-like state of peace, rebellion triggered what the texts describe as a terrifying decreation process.
And the term decreation really captures the severity perfectly. Leviticus 26 outlines a 7-fold escalation of discipline. It doesn't start with physical destruction, it starts internally with psychological terror.
Wow.
Yeah, the text specifically warns of a trembling heart, failing eyes, and anguish of soul. It describes a state of paranoia where people are so psychologically broken that they flee when no one is even pursuing them.
Just a constant state of fear.
Exactly. And from there, the escalation moves outward to physical ailments and then to economic ruin, predicting the land will simply refuse to yield its crops.
It's a slow, agonizing dismantling of a society. And if the rebellion continues despite all of those warnings, it culminates in the ultimate penalty, which is the diaspora.
The scattering.
Right. The great king promises to literally scatter the people among the nations, drawing out a sword after them and leaving their homeland desolate. And this is where the theology connects directly to recorded history. The text frames Israel's demand for a human king, which you can find in 1 Samuel 8 as the ultimate breach of contract.
Because they wanted a human monarch?
Exactly. So they could be like all the other nations.
Yeah.
They were effectively rejecting the great king's direct sovereignty.
The historical alignment there is hard to ignore when you read the subsequent events through this lens. Deuteronomy 28 warns that a nation from afar will swoop down as swift as the eagle flies.
The eagle imagery is so specific.
It is, and historians and theologians frequently link that specific imagery to the Roman eagle, the aquila. When the Roman Empire brutally besieged Jerusalem in 70 CE, destroying the Second Temple, it kicked off a 2,000-year period where the Jewish people existed as a stateless entity.
Which perfectly aligns with the contractual warning in Deuteronomy that they would find no resting place for the sole of their foot.
And the historical footprint doesn't stop with Rome either.
No, it doesn't. The documents map this contractual enforcement straight through the Middle Ages and into the modern era. You look at the expulsions from England in 1290 or the Spanish Inquisition in 1492. In medieval Europe, Jewish communities were often trapped in what the texts describe as an iron yoke of servitude to foreign powers.
They would be invited in for their economic utility.
Right, heavily taxed and then violently expelled and stripped of their wealth. The ancient text explicitly predicts, "You shall build a house, but you shall not dwell in it." And then, of course, the sheer, unimaginable scale of the horrors in the 20th century, specifically the Holocaust. Those are viewed within this framework through the terrifying lens of Leviticus, where even the sound of a shaken leaf shall cause them to flee.
Taking that a step further, the overarching thesis points to a profound paradigm shift that occurred in the late 19th century after 2 millennia of this pedagogical discipline.
We're talking about Theodor Herzl here.
Yes, enter Theodor Herzl and the birth of political Zionism. Herzl was an assimilated Jewish journalist living in Europe, and his entire worldview was shattered by the Dreyfus Affair in 1894.
Where a Jewish military officer was falsely accused of treason.
And publicly degraded in France, yes. Herzl concluded that European anti-Semitism was a permanent, incurable disease, prompting him to write Der Judenstaat, the Jewish state.
But according to this analysis, Herzl's conclusion is where a massive theological complication arises. Zionism wasn't a religious awakening. It was a secular political movement born out of the failure of the European Enlightenment to protect the Jewish people.
What's fascinating here is the theological critique of Zionism in these documents. It classifies political Zionism not as a divine restoration orchestrated by the great king, but as a secular soteriology.
Wait, soteriology, that's a theology term for the study of salvation, right?
It is.
So the argument here is that Zionism wasn't just a political movement. It was an attempt at human self-salvation.
That captures the critique perfectly. For 2,000 years, the diaspora was viewed by religious scholars as a spiritual condition requiring a spiritual solution.
National repentance.
Namely, national repentance, or teshuvah, to trigger divine intervention and fulfill the ancient contract. Zionism fundamentally reclassified the diaspora. It decided the diaspora was a political problem requiring a political solution.
Taking matters into their own hands.
Exactly. In doing so, it effectively removed divine agency from the equation entirely, substituting the machinery of a modern state for the Messiah.
The narrative actually draws a really fascinating parallel here that helped me wrap my head around this critique. It points back to King Saul.
The 1 Samuel 13 account.
Yeah. If you remember the story, Saul is waiting for the prophet Samuel to arrive and offer a sacrifice before a massive battle against the Philistines. But Samuel is late, and Saul's troops are terrified. They are literally scattering and hiding in caves. So Saul panics.
He forces the issue.
He forces the issue and offers the sacrifice himself. He bypasses the divine instructions because of the urgent, terrifying physical reality on the ground. The text likens political Zionism to that exact moment. Out of the desperate, completely understandable fear of global scattering and the looming shadow of the Holocaust, Zionism established a state for physical survival. But in doing so, it bypassed the biblical prerequisite of spiritual repentance.
And by decoupling the blessing of the land from the obedience required by the ancient suzerainty treaty, this analysis concludes that Zionism didn't actually break the curse.
It just shifted it.
Right. It merely transitioned the Jewish people from a diaspora of displacement into a diaspora of conflict. Yes, they secured a physical refuge, a state built on military strength and stone. But the universal peace and the heart of flesh promised in the biblical restoration haven't materialized.
Because they're still fighting.
The practical reality of this diaspora of conflict is that they are still relying on human agency, living constantly by the sword, surrounded by hostility.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If this perspective views Zionism as an act of human self-reliance, the next logical step is to look at how that reliance manifests in modern military strategy. And the text points us to a very specific classified blueprint from 2001.
The Wesley Clark Memo.
Let's fast forward to the days immediately following September 11. General Wesley Clark, a former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, is visiting the Pentagon, and he is shown a memo from the Secretary of Defense's office. This memo outlines a premeditated roadmap to topple 7 specific countries in 5 years.
Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finally finishing off with Iran.
It was a massive geopolitical blueprint that committed the United States and its allies to a rigid framework of regime change across the Middle East and North Africa.
And while that initial 5-year timeline obviously collapsed under the weight of massive insurgencies and the realities of modern warfare, the strategic list of target nations remained remarkably intact over the next 2 decades.
It really did.
If we track the execution of that blueprint all the way to February 2026, we see the intended conclusion finally playing out.
Which brings us to Operation Epic Fury, also known as Roaring Lion. We are talking about the most overt, devastating U.S.-Israeli military alignment in history. 25 years after General Clark saw that Pentagon memo, the world watches as U.S. B-2 stealth bombers and Israeli F-35s execute a massive joint campaign against Iran.
A completely unprecedented strike.
They systematically dismantle nuclear sites, missile hubs, and military leadership, and it reportedly results in the death of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. The final country on that 2001 list is officially finished off.
But orchestrating and executing a 25-year global blueprint of that magnitude requires an incredibly deep, often invisible network of intelligence and military coordination.
The Shadow Network.
And this is where the analysis highlights the dark underbelly of that geopolitical alignment. It points to a shadow network of state assets who operate with what is essentially intelligence immunity.
To understand how a 25-year covert war can happen without public oversight, the documents bring up a really chilling illustration of this intelligence immunity. They cite a 2025 interview where attorney Alan Dershowitz is discussing the late Jeffrey Epstein.
Right, the hypothetical about national security.
Dershowitz argues that in the realm of national security, if someone is affiliated with the CIA or the Mossad, it functions as an absolute get-out-of-jail-free card. He essentially claimed that if Epstein had been an intelligence asset, Dershowitz could have gotten him 0 jail time simply by going up the chain to the highest levels of government.
It's a shocking claim.
The point of including this isn't just about Epstein. It's to highlight a 2-tier justice system. It shows that the architects and assets of these massive geopolitical moves are protected from any real accountability.
And the erosion of accountability inevitably leads to the erosion of public trust. When the public begins to perceive that intelligence agencies operate entirely above the law to serve secret state agendas like a multi-decade regime change, blueprint institutional credibility vanishes.
It just evaporates.
The documents cite pollster Rich Barris, noting that in early 2026, the data showed only 15% of the American public had a great deal of trust in the FBI.
15%, that's incredibly low.
And a mere 13% trusted the CIA. Nearly half the country viewed the intelligence community as an active threat to their civil liberties. This catastrophic collapse in trust is framed as the domestic collateral damage of executing this 25-year foreign policy objective.
So on the global stage, we have this massive geopolitical victory in February 2026. Iran's military capabilities completely neutralized. But when we merge this modern geopolitical reality back with the ancient biblical texts, the implications laid out here are truly staggering.
This is where the synthesis happens.
Let's look at the book of Revelation chapter 6, verses 1 and 2. It describes the opening of the first seal and a rider on a white horse who goes out conquering and to conquer. He has a crown and he carries a bow, but crucially, he has no arrows.
The symbolism of the bow without arrows is key to understanding this interpretation. It implies a victory achieved through the threat of overwhelming force, through deception, or incomplete warfare.
A bloodless surrender, maybe?
It is an image of a conqueror who brings about a state of peace, but it is a false, temporary peace. And one of the most provocative claims in this entire analysis is the prophetic identification of this rider. The texts posit that Donald Trump is viewed prophetically as this white horse rider.
The documents connect the 2026 U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran directly to the ancient prophecy in Jeremiah 49. Jeremiah prophesies that God will break the bow of Elam.
Elam being the ancient biblical name for the geographic region of Iran.
Right. Through Operation Epic Fury, the military power, or the bow of Iran, is broken. But Jeremiah also says that God will set his throne in Elam. The analysis interprets this throne not as a literal, direct divine rule from the heavens, but as the reinstatement of a friendly, pro-Israel leader in Iran.
Someone like Reza Pahlavi.
Exactly, the exiled son of the deposed Shah.
The orchestration of this regime change by Trump, acting in the role of the white horse rider, fundamentally alters the entire power structure of the Middle East.
It changes everything overnight.
By neutralizing Iran, it eliminates the existential proxy threats, groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis that Iran had been funding and directing for decades. It grants Israel an unprecedented era of security and regional dominance. But the overarching thesis is emphatic on this point.
This is a deceptive piece.
Yes, a deceptive piece.
It's a human-engineered security bubble. It's the ultimate culmination of that Zionist self-liberation we talked about earlier with the King Saul analogy. Israel feels safe. They feel like they've finally achieved the dream of secure borders and silenced enemies, but they haven't fulfilled the ancient suzerainty contract's requirement for spiritual repentance.
They bypass the condition again?
They are relying on the power of the White House and stealth bombers, not the divine protection of the great king.
Which naturally raises the most pressing question for anyone following this timeline. Where does this leave us right now?
So what does this all mean? What does this mean for you, for us today, living in the aftermath of these events?
To answer that, we have to look at the prophet Daniel, specifically Daniel chapter 9, which introduces the Hebrew concept of Shavuim, or sevens.
There's sevens.
The angel Gabriel reveals to Daniel a highly specific timeline of 70 weeks decreed for the nation of Israel to finish their transgressions and bring in everlasting righteousness. But the etymology of Shavuim in this biblical context doesn't mean literal weeks of 7 days. It refers to 70 units of 7 years.
Let's do the math on that out loud so we grasp the scale. 70 units multiplied by 7 years. That's a 490-year divine countdown clock.
That is the exact mathematical framework, and the prophecy divides these 70 weeks into segments. According to the broad consensus of biblical scholars tracking this historical timeline, 69 of those weeks, which is 483 years, have already been fulfilled in recorded history.
Culminating around the time of the 1st century CE.
Correct. That leaves one final week, one final terrifying 7-year period remaining on the divine clock. This period is what is universally known in eschatology as the tribulation, or the time of Jacob's trouble.
And this is the absolute crux of the entire deep dive today. This is the ultimate takeaway we need you to understand about the claims in these sources. According to this comprehensive, sweeping historical analysis, the incredible world-altering events of February 2026, the total neutralization of Iran, the breaking of the bow of Elam, and the resulting deceptive peace established by the rider on the white horse, all of this means that the final 7-year tribulation is extremely close at hand.
Yes, the geopolitical stage is now perfectly set. By eliminating the external threats that have plagued them for decades, Israel has been lulled into a profound but completely false sense of security.
They think they've won.
They believe the 2,000-year curse of the diaspora of conflict is finally broken. But the documents heavily infer a crucial defining detail about our current moment. The tribulation has not actually begun just yet.
Let me repeat that, because it is so vital to understanding this entire framework. The final 7 years have not begun yet. The world is currently resting on a razor's edge.
A prophetic pause.
We are in a brief, almost imperceptible prophetic pause. The white horse has marched, the deceptive peace is settling over the Middle East, but the final countdown of Jacob's trouble is waiting in the wings. It's an impending reality that is right at the door. The handle is turning, but the threshold hasn't been crossed.
It creates a tremendous, almost suffocating sense of tension when you view world events through this lens. The human-engineered peace, the very thing celebrated as a triumph of modern diplomacy and military might, is actually the ultimate sign that the divine wrath of that final week is imminent.
It's an incredible, complex journey we've just taken you on. We started with an ancient contractual curse laid out in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. We track the pedagogical enforcement of that contract through the psychological weight and physical scattering of a 2,000-year diaspora.
We covered a lot of history.
We explored the secular defiance of political Zionism, trying to break that curse on its own terms, substituting the state for the divine. We uncovered a 2001 Pentagon hit list driving 25 years of covert intelligence operations that eroded public trust.
And it all culminated in those 2026 strikes.
Exactly. The February 2026 U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran, establishing a false peace that sets the world right on the very precipice of the final 7-year eschatological countdown.
As we wrap up this exploration, I want to leave you with one final concept to mull over on your own. If human history is truly operating on this predetermined 490-year divine timetable, a massive architectural year-for-a-day blueprint, how does that completely reshape our modern understanding of free will?
That's a huge question.
When global superpowers, decorated generals, and presidents execute vast military campaigns that they genuinely believe are grounded in realpolitik, resource management, and national security, are they actually just playing out pre-written roles in an ancient script, a script they don't even realize they're following?
That is a thought that will definitely keep you up at night, questioning who is really pulling the levers of history. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning those deeper currents running just beneath the daily headlines, and we will see you next time.